Welcome to this explainer. If you've ever looked at Scotland's university sector and scratched your head wondering how it's actually governed, you are in exactly the right place. Today we are unpacking the fascinating distributed accountability system of Scottish higher education to uncover where regulation actually sits.
Here's how we're going to break this down today. First, the missing regulator paradox. Then, mapping the ecosystem. Third, the TQEF quality loop. Fourth, boundaries and redress. Fifth, a legislative reality check. And finally, the architecture of strength. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. The missing regulator paradox. So where exactly is the single regulator?
We've got to start by confronting a major myth, one that frankly puzzles a lot of global higher ed professionals. If you're looking at Scotland and searching for a single registration regulator, something like England's Office for Students, you're just not going to find one. It literally doesn't exist. And for some international observers, that immediately sets off alarm bells, right? They're thinking, wait, does this mean the system is lightly governed?
But when we actually contrast these models side by side, a really fascinating difference emerges. England relies heavily on that central Office for Students register. Scotland, it uses a distributed accountability system. And what this proves is that the absence of a single register absolutely does not mean the system is unregulated. Not at all. Connected duties across multiple agencies, funding conditions, and institutional assurance, they do a massive amount of the heavy lifting here.
So the really interesting question isn't whether Scotland regulates higher education, because it definitely does. The question is where regulation actually sits. The accountability framework here operates through a completely different architecture. It can be incredibly demanding without just copying a standard compliance threshold regulator model. It places an unusual but very deliberate weight on institutional responsibility, peer review, and continuous enhancement.
All right, Section 2, mapping the ecosystem. Let's look at this distributed accountability in action. Let's actually map this out. Notice how interconnected these legal jurisdictions are? It's like a finely tuned engine. Scottish ministers set the policy and legislation. The Scottish Funding Council, or SFC, actually funds the institutions and, crucially, holds the statutory duty for quality. QAA Scotland steps in to deliver external review. But the institutions themselves? They actually own their academic standards. We've also got the Privy Council and the Ombudsman playing highly specific roles, which we are going to unpack in just a minute.
Now, another absolutely vital piece of this map is the SCQF, the Scottish Credit and Qualifications Framework. Take the famous 4-year Scottish Honours degree, for example. That sits at SCQF Level 10. But remember, the framework uses level and credit points to describe qualifications. It does not mandate a universal, legal duration for every single learner. Things like prior credit or specific institutional program design can change a student's route entirely. It's descriptive, not a legal command for duration.
It's also analytically vital to separate funding from the actual legal authority to award degrees. Listen, just because an institution gets funding from the SFC, that doesn't automatically grant them degree awarding authority. In Scotland, that application follows a completely distinct route. It goes through the QAA's advisory committee and straight to the Privy Council.
Moving on to Section 3, the TQEF quality loop. Let's trace how quality assurance actually works.
So, the Tertiary Quality Enhancement Framework, or TQEF, is the current quality architecture running from 2024 right through to 2031. Set by the Scottish Funding Council, this framework places immense weight on institutional responsibility. But it's not just a supportive pat on the back. Institutions must actively and continuously prove that their internal processes are effective through annual engagement and external review.
I want you to follow this evidence chain with me. It all starts at home. Step 1, institutions monitor their provision annually. Step 2, they conduct periodic institution-led quality reviews, or ILQR. Based on that, Step 3, they submit a self-evaluation and action plan directly to the SFC. Only then, at Step 4, does QAA Scotland come in for the Tertiary Quality Enhancement Review, which is a peer-led external review. Finally, Step 5 ensures those review outcomes feed right back into institutional governance for enhancement. It is a continuous closed loop of evidence.
And while QAA states that this TQER review method meets European ESG standards, lexical precision here is absolutely everything. This is a specific claim about the review method itself. It is not, I repeat, not a blanket claim that every single Scottish institution is separately ESG accredited. Precision in this ecosystem really matters.
Section 4. Boundaries and redress.
How do we handle online TNE and student complaints?
Because Scotland doesn't issue separate licenses for online higher education. The degree awarding body retains total responsibility through what we call mode-neutral assurance. Whether a student is sitting in a historic lecture hall in Edinburgh or logging it online from their couch in another country, the accountability perimeter for academic standards, assessment, and student experience remains exactly the same, no exceptions.
And this strict accountability extends overseas, too. Collaborative and transnational education, or TNE, stays strictly within the Scottish degree awarding body's accountability perimeter. It's far stronger than just hoping overseas programs are somehow covered. In fact, institutions are expected to actively participate in QAA's specific QE-TNE evaluation. But, what happens when things genuinely go wrong for a student? Unresolved, non-academic complaints escalate to the Scottish Public Services Ombudsman, or SPSO. Notice Scotland doesn't use the English OIA. Institutions have to use a very specific higher education model complaints handling procedure. And after those internal routes are completely exhausted, the SPSO can step in to look at service failure or procedural maladministration. But, and this is key, it does not normally override academic judgment.
While we're on the topic of boundaries and funding, let's clear up a really common misconception about student finance. What is casually referred to as free tuition in Scotland is actually a very specific eligibility-dependent public funding entitlement. It requires eligible Scottish domicile, it applies to eligible first undergraduate degrees, and it is entirely distinct from living cost support. So free tuition is really just shorthand, definitely not a universal rule for everyone.
Section 5. Legislative Reality Check. Let's look at the 2026 Act.
The 2026 Act brings some major systemic upgrades, but the exact legal wording is crucial. The Act received royal assent on March 11, 2026, meaning it is officially enacted. However, while Part 6 came into force the very next day, the core substantive parts, Parts 1 through 5, await future commencement regulations before they actually operate. You literally can't treat those provisions as legally binding right this second. It's an important distinction.
So if you are an institutional leader navigating this rigorous, evidence-driven environment today, here's your checklist. You need to map the full TQF evidence chain directly to your governing body oversight. Treat online and TNE provision as your internal awarding accountability. Make sure you keep academic appeals totally separate from SPSO escalations. Keep your SQF decisions completely traceable. And crucially, you need to track those 2026 Act commencement provisions closely.
Finally, Section 6, the architecture of strength, connected duties over single registers.
For international observers, especially those looking from systems like India, we have got to move past simplistic one-to-one equivalencies. You can't just draw a straight line and compare the SSVC directly to India's UGC, or present the QAA as a conventional single regulator. The true value lies in functional comparisons. We need to analyze exactly how specific duties, funding, quality, authority, are distributed and observe how the evidence moves so smoothly between them. So, we leave you with this provocative thought from our explainer today. Regulation is not one regulator. It is the connected architecture of funding, quality, authority, evidence, and redress. Does true regulatory strength actually require a single overarching regulator? Or does Scotland prove that real, uncompromising rigor emerges precisely from this connected web of accountability? Understanding how these pieces lock together is the true key to understanding Scottish higher education. Thanks for joining me, keep asking the hard questions, and we'll see you next time.